Now, we've been having conversations here many times about persons with disabilities, and many times we have mentioned the National Council for Persons with Disabilities and asked, okay, so what do they do? How far does their mandate stretch? What registers do they have? What services do they offer persons with disabilities? Do they get support from the government? Where else do they get support from? All those questions hopefully are going to be answered this morning by the Executive Director of the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, Harun Maalim Hassan. Good morning.
Good morning, Eric.
Karibu sana to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Asante sana. Thank you so much.
Karibu sana. Now, first of all, that love message, even you, it applies.
Very much.
Everybody loves everybody.
Yes.
Yes. CT is going to welcome you with the day's proverb, courtesy of EcoBank, the Pan-African Bank. CT, in which part of Africa are the proverbs from this week?
We are in Angola, the seventh largest country in Africa.
Okay.
Okay? Today's proverb is very simple and straightforward. The real journey of discovery begins in old age.
The real journey of discovery begins in old age.
Yes.
Harun is nodding. What's the interpretation of this?
Yeah, I agree. And they say it actually also in my faith, in my culture. Life begins at 40, old age start there. You become wiser. You have a lot of experience to share. So I agree. As you grow older, you become...
The real journey of life begins at that point. When you have all the experiences, now you have perspectives.
Exactly.
You can now apply them. Okay. Harun, what is the National Council for Persons with Disabilities?
Yeah, thank you, Eric, and thank you, CT and Do. I think the situation room, we have been hearing it for a while and following in radio. Today we are right there.
Yes.
So I hope we will going to raise, an important conversation that is really of interest to persons with disabilities, their families, and the stakeholders across the country. So National Council is a state agency, formed through an act of Parliament, Disability Act of 2003. But I have to remind you and Kenyans, 2003 ilikuwa wakati ya rainbow, when Kenyans were so optimistic, you remember?
Yes.
And then President Kibaki was on a wheelchair.
Yes.
Before, the same around that time. That time I was not on a wheelchair. I have no idea what wheelchair was all about. So we are among many Kenyans who are so optimistic about the new dawn, So we're praying very hard for the president to get out of that metal and to keep the country running. But that wheelchair meant something significant to millions of Kenyans with disabilities. And they've been there before the president was on a wheelchair. And they've been agitating and fighting for inclusion right. But opportunity somehow came for them, quote unquote. So they used that as an opportunity probably to push and to petition the government that they need to be recognized. Around that time is when, buildings started having ramps because the president is in a wheelchair. Uhuru Park, Harambee House, State House. It became kind of a blessing in disguise. And the good old man must have realized that disability is not about people's impairment. It is about barriers across people with different impairment. Those like me on a wheelchair is more of environment, how we build our environment. I've came here very smoothly now. If there is no that smoothness, maybe I wouldn't have met to here. So the Disability Act was barely signed shortly after the president got out of the wheelchair, 2003. And that act is what created National Council for Persons with Disabilities in 2004, around October, November 2004. So this year, Council is celebrating, or Kenya for that matter, is celebrating 20 years of disability inclusion in this country. So it's a long journey. But this journey also, started pre-independence. Because we have said that tomorrow is a Valentine and it's a love day. The story of a struggle of disability started with love, shortly before independence. A white lady, very beautiful, fell in love with a complete blind young man from Makwini, when the issue of race was high, a lot of things. So that started speaking to especially those who are blind. And, Kenya Society for the Blind came up, Kenya Union for the Blind came up, and then they made the first march or demonstration for the matter, quote unquote, immediately after independence now in 1963 to Kenya's first president, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. So then that time the agitation was more of education inclusion and accessibility for blind people. And it started with that young man who fell in love with a beautiful Mzungu girl. So it became, coming to the media, public attention and conversation started. So focus started shifting into issues of access to education now. Many commission came, issue of rehabilitations, came up. And then President Moi came. Because Kenya's journey was a bit progressive in terms of disability inclusion. President Moi, during the powerful provisional administration, I don't know whether some of you might remember, he made national fundraising, Harambee. And that Harambee led to creation of a trustee called National Fund for Disabled of Kenya, which is there up to now. Rehema House 1 was built, Rehema House 2 was built, and they have some endowment where they focus on supporting, people with disabilities in education, in assistive devices, and many other things. Become really a big contribution of President Moi's administration. And then President Kibaki came, and disabled people celebrate him as a Lincoln of our time, actually, because of the acts that I've mentioned, the Constitution of Kenya that put the Bill of Rights. I mean, the issue of personal disability, right at the center. The convention of the UN Convention on the Right of Persons with Disability was also ratified, domesticated, during his time. Conversation, picked up, where even disabled people come out now, not as a favor, but as a right, fighting, A lot of advocacy came, a lot of support came, people started coming out, become quite healthy, conversation and things like that. And then President Uhuru came's administration, I think he was credited with implementation of the Constitution, but the concept like Agbo came during his time, addressing issue of poverty among women, youth, and persons with disability. Remember those?
Yeah.
Even though disabled people and the players in the sector fought so hard that 30% should be segregated, that you have to have a clear definition that this percentage is for persons with disability. Women are very active. They took 25%. The youth took 4%, maybe 1%, But if you said only 5% for persons with disability, it's a clear, demarcation kind of.
Yeah.
So I think President Uhuru's administration also allowed him for that. And then the current administration came with a raft of ideas in their manifesto, including 100% universal health coverage for persons with disabilities, ring-fencing the Hustlers Fund, deliberate quota, for scholarship program for persons with disabilities, and many other things. So Kenya, progressively, if you look in the continent, we've done something, but we have a lot more to do. Sometimes there is in having a law and the policies in place, but realization becomes
practice,
another story. So we have the journeys, very interesting journeys, up and down, and some countries also come and benchmark, to come and learn from us. The other day we received Commission of Disability from the Federal Republic of Nigeria. They're wondering, Kenyans who are working and earning up to a certain level are exempted from tax-free. How is that happening? Saying if you have a disability and you can afford, because life is tough, you can import a car duty-free. They were wondering, how is that happening?
So we have seen that there has been progress, because we've come from a place where the conversation was not being had, and as insensitive as it sounds, persons with disability, for the longest time historically, were not even regarded. We then began to see where the regard came about. It could have been as a result of agitation or insistence on a certain way of doing things. And then we began to see infrastructure changed in buildings. We started to see ramps started to be put in and things like that. We started to see that there was a bigger writing on signs in buildings and things for those who would be visually impaired. I mean, the list goes on. But that was just one side of it. We then started to see the inclusion of persons with disability in positions of leadership, in employment where previously they would not have been given an opportunity. So we saw the character of progress then start to change, whereby there was, acceptance that it's there, and then we started to see inclusion. Mm-hmm. But like you've said, there's still a lot that needs to be done. Can we walk through what some of those things are and what challenges are still being faced in society today that we can actually do something about?
Thank you so much. I think I have to start with figures. According to KNBS report, there are about 1 million Kenyans with disabilities. And these figures is grossly being contested by persons with disabilities and their stakeholders particularly. Because scientifically, we were told 15 to 16% of any population is persons with disabilities. That translates to more than 6 million Kenyans to have a disability. And disability is a phenomenon that is on rise. Not from the traditional causes of disability, because we have advances in medicine now, like measles rendering people blind or polio, but other factors. Road accident like you may, pop, you either die or you become disabled or you become kawaida. And then, lifestyle diseases, hypertension, blood pressure, cancer, many things are churning the number into. So coming to, the question you asked, then disability, as I earlier said, is not more of the impairment of this person now. It's the barriers that every day they contend with. Different form of disabilities contend with different barriers. If someone is blind or if someone is deaf, the barrier is more of communication. If someone is, different, but we all have one in common, attitudinal barrier. If you see someone with disability, what comes to your mind? In terms of access to opportunity, in terms of acceptance, in terms of, that becomes really a problem. So I think as a government, through the National Council and many entities, we're trying to push that disability is not a business of only one entity. It has to be mainstreamed in all the service of the government, in all the programs of the government. It's all our responsibility, but we have a role to play. So Council, one of the key mandate of the Council is to register persons with disabilities. And we must have statistics in place. And not only statistics, we must have detailed socio-economic information about persons with disabilities in place. So that when we plan, we have at least something. That's one thing. And this process used to be very difficult, extremely difficult, because it is a process. It starts with medical assessment. And the medical assessment is done by medical team. Previously, all the hospitals in Kenya, they have their own tool that don't speak to each other. And then the forms are shifted to Afya House before devolution, that is. Even during the devolution, before it was decentralized, we managed to decentralize last year. And then Director of Medical Signature become an instruction to the Council now to register that person and capture him or her in our database. But devolution brought service closer to people. We say this registration, because for you to access opportunities and benefit, you must be registered. We say it must follow devolution, and that signature must be moved from Afya House to County Directors of Health or County Directors of Medical Services. And that's what we succeeded. It wasn't easy. It was tough, but that's what we managed to see. And then we came up with new registration system where we are capturing now enough information about persons with disability. That's the most important milestone, for us. And then we put, I heard when I was coming, you were talking about e-citizen. We put also that registration on e-citizen platform. Ours is free. Free, so that now the only thing that now a client needs is just that medical assessment from the county director, the passport size, his ID, and for minors maybe a birth certificate, and just a smartphone and internet connectivity. And we put that 2 months ago. And in a record less than 2 months, about 8,000 Kenyans have already registered, making, now the power, into their hands. So the numbers are coming up because there are many benefits that if you're registered, that you can access, both from national government or county government, going forward. Then the other thing that we have also focused so much on last 2 years is the issue of education. We run a scholarship program. Each year, we support 542 kids for full scholarship from Form 1 to Form 4 with some of our partners.
As the council?
As a council. Yes, 542, together with Kenya Pipeline and Kenya Commercial Bank as our key, partner. Because education Merit is the fighting chance for child with disability.
Yeah.
If you give him more higher education, you will never see the disability. You will see them. There'll be journalists, top journalists like you here. There'll be engineers, there'll be lawyers. But the moment we deny them that, that's when you see their disability.
Yeah.
So, but there's so much into education for children with disabilities. Are we reading it together with the child's disability? Sometimes because of the impairment of the child or the kind of the disability of the child might drop out. He might get or she might get scholarship but don't have a wheelchair or maybe don't have a braille facility or a adaptive technology that makes life easier for them. So we came up with that program where now 542 every year benefit. And then we introduced and we launched it 3 weeks ago in Nyeri with our cabinet secretary and county government of Nyeri, mentorship and career guidance program. Where, we bring this student together, pair them with, people who've met in life. I don't know whether you will say in spite or despite, their disabilities. Their disabilities, and things like that. And then we support, groups and organizations of persons with disabilities in advocacy platforms. Come out, speak for yourself. Sometimes if you don't speak for yourself, people might never speak for you the way you want it.
Yep.
So come out, speak yourself, participate in budget making processes, conversations in governance, participate in politics, anything, speak out, So we support them, in advocacy platform. And of recent also the last 3 weeks we have been churning out literatures and research that has not been there. Yesterday we released the first landscape analysis, disability landscape analysis in this country. We're supported by USAID on this.
What is that?
What it is the situation of status of disability inclusion in this country at national level and at the county level. And the situation is not that kind. We've looked at the judiciary, we've looked at parliament, we've looked at the executive, we've looked at the county government, all the role that they can play, so that we came up with key recommendations that we have to all, implement or make provisions, interventions, to include persons with disabilities in our country. Yes.
Harun Maalim Hassan is our guest this morning. He is the Executive Director of the National Council for Persons with Disabilities. And like you said, we are celebrating 20 years of disability inclusion in this country. City?
Somewhere along the line, one looks at the progress that has been made with people who have disabilities in this country, and much as there's been a lot of progress, I would argue it isn't enough. When we began the show, you mentioned, when we were off air, that in the year 2002 you were not on a wheelchair. I'd like to ask, what happened?
Yeah, thank you. In 2007, I was a fairly young man at 28 and very active. So, together with 3 friends, we drove from here, Nairobi. I come from Mandera. Participating in some clan primaries in politics, let me put it that way. Even in our area, clans are so structured that you don't just wake up and campaign. The elders must convene somewhere and decisions have to be made. So as a young man, I felt, I know I will not go anywhere. Let me go and announce my political arrival, that they should be aware of me, just for fun or something. So on our way back to Nairobi, 3 of us, and I was the one who was driving actually. And I was not on a seat belt. When we told every time to wear a seat belt, people think it's a small thing. It's a big thing. So my friend who was next to me in the car told me I'm driving very fast. I should fasten my seat belt. I refused. That's the only conversation I can remember. The rest is what I was told. So what happened is, immediately after the only thing I can remember is we were driving down a small hill. And then probably the front tire of the car busted. And so maybe not. I might have pressed, the brake and the car started rolling. So the door was open, I was
out.
Yes, so I had a lot of injuries, head injuries, But people didn't knew that I had one terrible injuries my back. And there, cars are very scarce.
Yes.
So a lorry we overtook, for a while, came. So they made me to sit in the cabin. That must have worsened the entire. So they dropped me to the nearest health facility. Then the following day, my family and relatives lifted me to Nairobi. Those are the stories I was told. So I spent 1 year in hospital, actually. But what I remember most was my doctor. He came and he's quite a very interesting man. He said, Hassan, you're out of danger. You refuse to die. But what he told me was, you will never walk again. That's what went into my head. So my journey of stress, depression began. But I have a very strong family, wonderful family, and I also have very close friends who stood with me. Sometimes the social capital you have also really matters. So what happened to you? Those who are around you, But I started reading extensively about disability. I wanted to know theologically, contemporary world, why disability in the first.
Yeah.
That process became a therapy for me because the focus started shifting away from me. I was serving as a district officer at the time, at DO, here in Okoh. So I even lost interest in that job. I wanted to know why disability in the first place. And the more I read about it, the more I become a scholar or an authority in the area. So I started picking that line more of as a career. Before then, I didn't know about National Council. It was there. I have no clue. I knew I had friends with disabilities. Meet them, but they've never been so close to me.
Yeah.
Now I wanted to know. Some of the friends that I hang around with now are people who, I don't know whether I will use that phrase, as I say sometimes, birds of feathers also. Because you understand each other. There's something you can pick and learn. Like the current member of Parliament of Western team, and yesterday we were together. Some of the people who picked me up, I remember visiting his office, and he used to run another office next to National Spinal Injury Hospital. So one day he told me, Hassan, we are going to Olopolis next Saturday and to have a goat.
To eat nyama.
Yes. Do you have someone to bring you? And you're going to see a lot of guys. That time I was struggling to accept this wheelchair. It was like, So I told a friend to anipeleka hapo. We went. And I saw many guys coming on a wheelchair driving because they're talking football, they're talking money, they're talking power. So I was like wondering, are these guys really serious? and I quietly, I was just sitting there and looking at them, and my journey of acceptance began, Start driving, And today I joke, if my legs come back, even I've forgotten how to use it. We've moved on, It's how you integrate what happened to you in life that matters. How you see yourself inside is what people see outside. So we say, let us contribute in change making in this country to make disability inclusion a reality.
Yeah.
That disability is just diversity, In people, there's a tall person, short
invisible.
person. It's just a diversity.
Right.
Like if you go to West, I go alone sometimes, and I don't feel that I'm unique and different, because everything is accessible. You move. We have to build now, so a culture. I also say, sometimes let me tell you, I don't have to wear like smart I am today. Sometimes I have to wear like it is optical. People, they will call me Mwijimwa. But if I wear very casual, my friend is Sadaka na Patanga. Or the Uruma, it's nature,
Yes,
of human. But I think as a country, coming back to our conversation, I know we have a lot more to do, but the issue of disability has become an important conversation. Because you've mentioned issue of political participation, like now in the Senate we have people, in the county assemblies we have people. Though sadly, more than 20 counties don't have even MCAs with disabilities in their county assembly. Quite very unfortunate. And so if they don't have people to agitate, to raise the issue, it becomes really, a big thing. So I think, of course, issue of budget is also another big issue, I have to admit here, sometimes conflicting priorities comes, the demands are overwhelming, the needs rise by the day, and disability is becoming a passion because of the opportunity to present.
Yeah, one of the things you've talked about, and I think you're giving allusion to, all right, when you travel and you look at how it's been done in different jurisdictions, two things happen. One, there is an acceptance, and that's a cultural, social decision. But then there's also a policy decision that has been made, because we can say it, yes, we accept people with disability, persons, I can say it, right? But how am I going to actually show that I mean what I say, especially when I'm in a position to do something about it? And through policy. That it is not a question of, can we have a discussion about whether this can be done? No, it becomes law. This will be done. Thereafter, you will realize and recognize the benefits of doing it in that manner. And so these things became policy. We have very few number of people in Kenya today, people with disability who are in positions of government. We have, in the corporate sector, many policies that have come up and said, we will hire, we will insist that certain things are being done. Thereafter, you realize, would you have been able to see 10 years ago, for example, that a person with disability would be able to earn because they were hired? But because we see that it is insisted upon, we then see that actually, yes, you can do a job just like anybody else can. And we can say it, but when we do it, it's something totally different. So right now, what are we seeing is being done by government? Because again, they're the vanguards of policy. What is being done to ensure that persons with disability are, number one, protected, and number two, are provided for in society today to ensure that they're living as best they can?
Yeah, thank you so much. I agree, policy is one thing and implementing the policy is a different thing. I said council came through an act of parliament of 2003. Sadly, I have to say, that's the only piece of law that has not conformed with the current constitution. And it came before devolution. So it is becoming it is silent on matters, counties. And that's why we have really a big problem. But the government of the day actually is fast-tracking how this act can be conformed with the current constitution. And it's already in the National Assembly and also at the Senate, and they are seeking for concurrence. And very sadly again, we don't have national disability policy in this country. Yes. I think our minister right now is really working very hard and bringing it up for public participation and then take it to the cabinet.
Yeah.
That self also brings some sort of impediment insofar as gaining, and things like that. But even then, something is going on. And some benefits are going on, for persons with disability, even though there are challenges here and there. Or employment, for example, constitutionally, they said 5% of any employment, whether elective or appointed, should be reserved for persons with disabilities. But within the constitution, there's one word that become a problem: progressive.
Yep.
Because you can't measure progressive. You find people employing 20 people and they employ one.
Yep.
Maybe a junior, level, and it's progressive. So provided we have an amendment and dropping of that word progressive, and it's in the it becomes really a big problem. But as a council, we run a career guidance portal where we made sure and made it mandatory for public entities to advertise through there. And also for persons with disabilities who are job seekers to also open an account and, apply through there. And because every year we produce a report on the status of disability mainstreaming report, and we started last year, and we are releasing a more skating on this March this year actually, and we invite you for that to monitor that 5% how much we are. According to the most recent report by Public Service Commission, we're at about 1.2% of that 5%. But if that 1.2% can be broken down, it might be very low level, in terms of, and yet there are people who are qualified even for bigger positions or
they don't get
higher
them.
job, and they may not get. So the report that we'll be releasing, we're going to really bring that, forth. So those are some of the effort that we are trying to see, how we can bring on board.
I want to ask a couple of questions. Number one, you said that for one to be registered with the council, they first need to go through medical assessment, and then the Director of Medical Services at national county level will then certify that and give it to their council. This medical assessment, is there a spectrum of conditions that are classified as disability?
Yeah.
And how wide is that? How many conditions qualify as disability?
Now, medical assessment is done through a tool developed by Ministry of Health, and it's called Medical Assessment and Categorization Guideline, Disability Medical Assessment and Categorization Guideline, and it is right in their website. And before that guidelines, there's no guidelines. So all hospitals are doing their own things. So this is what we have worked with them and other entities as a player in there. And then these guidelines has a lot of domains, because different disability requires different expertise. For example, if you are blind, ni expert ya watu ya macho. If you're deaf, ni expert ya watu ya hiyo area. If you're physical or and there's some form of disability that are hidden.
Yep.
You find mtu anatembea tu barabara, you think is hana disability, but akona disability, especially issues of mental health, bipolar, depression, schizophrenia. It's really on rise. So the new medical assessment as a guideline developed by Ministry of Health has all those domains. And how it is dispensed, each county icona committee headed by a medical superintendent and comprises of other expert physiotherapists, ophthalmologists, expert around those areas. So the individual appears before this panel, and this panel now assess, fill those forms, if things to be checked, what they check, and then it is now taken to county director of medical service now to sign. Once signed, now a copy is given to the client, and now the client now use that plus other requirements like now national identity and maybe for child birth certificate, to register. That's how it is.
But then, at early stages of a child, when a child is developing and now you're noticing that there is something, maybe if they have neurodivergence, how is that picked up from community level, at parent level, to go to the local health facility to be escalated up to the point where it gets to the Director of Medical Services?
Thanks for that. I think that one also put me a reminder that a few weeks ago we released a report on autism and other related developmental disorders, some forms of disabilities that are marginalized. I don't know whether we call it marginalized within marginalized. Kids that are born with autism, kids are born with cerebral palsy, big challenge, people who are constantly on therapy, constantly on drugs. We've seen families breaking up because of those children, and sometimes and largely mothers carrying the burden.
Yeah.
And because of those children, and the early identification of this child disability becomes really a problem. Sometimes the parent might realize after the child is 2 years or 3 years he or she has some condition, which is a bit too late, and things like in advanced medicine. Of course, I don't advocate for that. They do DNA lottery. You just say you want to watch it. But for pro-life conservative communities, we don't speak on that. So they cannot pick, the child, and that report brought us to the fore the early identifications and the assessment that needed and the care that is needed. I want to really announce here that we have launched a program for those kids of 100% health coverage, and we are really working very hard with the new reform NHIF that disability and health somehow intertwines. And disability, Eric, is the most expensive lifestyle. You know, as I say, unatembea, you don't use any finance to work. Me, I use some finance to work. You know, because you're sitting on a metal, you have to buy, right?
Yep.
Therapy, you know. Imagine a child who is always on therapy.
It's very costly.
You've seen families saying taking a cup is more expensive than even the therapy.
Yep.
And they have to carry this child every day. Maybe to Matatu, you know. Then we said, because the government said the 100% universal health coverage for persons with disabilities. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And then we say, let us unpackage that. Could we have an enhanced cover for these categories of disability? You know, whether it is the therapy, speech, drugs, physiotherapy, you know, and whatnot. And then, just to add on, there's a silent around caregivers and parents of such children.
Yep.
You know, you find parents becoming more depressed
It's a full-time
and becoming
job.
more disabled even because of that nature.
Yep.
And families breaking up, you know. And, you know, so we are also introducing in our programs, how can we have a focus on even parents themselves or the caregivers of those children in some form.
So you're introducing the program.
Yes.
When will it be fully operational?
Actually, the design is over, you know, everything we have put, you know, and we have got funding from the exchequer, not what we really wanted, but at least a startup. So I think now with the report that we have released and the recommendation that come up, we'll be releasing, you will be implementing, you know, this new program.
You know, you're saying like it's an expensive and really tasking venture to have. If you have a child who is in any of these autism spectrum, they, even if it's going to school, they will need a teacher's assistant. And our school system does not have any provision for teacher's assistant. They need, like you're saying, 100% access to medical care. So what are you doing about that? For example, about education, because as you talk about access to education, instead of just thinking about sending children to the physically, we know these are the schools that offer special needs education, which is mostly physical. How about these other ones?
It's true. For this one, access to education is the most expensive. I saw a parent a while back in a forum in Mombasa. He has a child with autism. And there's special school that understand the nature of this disability and how this is very expensive. He said, per time he's paying 100,000. 100,000. Yes, because of how many parents can afford that.
Yeah.
And is our government facilities, you know, inclusive of that? Largely not. But what are we doing around it? Because as a government, many policies that try to churn out were pushing for what is called inclusive education. Inclusive education means that a school should be open for all children, all learners. And one of the beauty with that, it addresses the issue of stigma and labeling. When the kids grow up, they don't see each other as different.
Yeah.
But if maybe you have a specialized school, like in Garissa, I saw a school of those with developmental disabilities. The local community there call it the School of Fools. And the headmaster say they call me the headmaster of the School of Fools. You see, that's the stigma, you know?
Already.
Yeah. So, you know, inclusive education is the most important thing where the kids, but different forms of disabilities have different levels of access. Absolutely. Like those like physical disability like me, you can go to any school. You only need environmental adjustment.
Yes.
If someone is blind, it's a different thing now.
Yep.
If someone is deaf, but for those kids of autism who are hyper sometimes, you know, and requires constant monitoring, you know, it becomes really a problem. One other thing actually is, even in the criminal justice police, or, you know, we've seen parents saying, mtoto yake alitoka tu nje kutafuta kitu, maybe kununua get straight. So the police wanashika.
Yep.
Sema unaranda
Loitering.
Yeah, loitering. And the kid might not explain himself, you know.
Yeah.
They end up, you know. So we have a big problem, you know, not only in the education side, but generally even, you know, for these groups of different autism spectrum. So I think the effort is not only government, but all the stakeholders, how we can come together, team up, and pull our little and see how we can make life bearable or better, you know. And you know, some of these autistic kids are very brilliant. And we are told in history,
Genius.
some of smart people are autistic.
Yep.
That we read, right? But wewe unataka mtoto yako akue daktari, you pit him. And the guy anataka kuwa mechanic. Without even training, he is already there.
He's naturally gifted.
Yes. I saw a father, he told me his son who is having autism, akiingia tu gari na gari imeokesha, anasema stop, ni gari iko na issue. Yeah. Anaenda, you know, you see his mind is wired on, but if you tell that guy to play guitar, he can't. Or you tell him to go become a doctor, he can't. So I think we need to have some sensitization also when we are addressing issue of education, how, you know, we can look at the child and talent and the expenses related with, which is quite enormous.
What have you done with this matter of sensitization and getting people to actually understand how to manage and how to ensure that people, children who have disabilities, get to enjoy the benefits that every other citizen of this country
enjoys?
Yes.
We encourage parents and organizations to form organizations to register with us. And then we support them, you know, through advocacy, grant, economic empowerment grant, you know, and even putting recommendation for them to the donors, you know, and how, you know, they can come up, you know, the more than 1,000 organizations, I'm not very sure exact, were registered, no, more than 3,000 organizations were registered with the National Council, whether it is community-based or whether they are playing national platform on advocacy. And some are very specific, some are for autism spectrum groups, some are all forms of disability, some are deaf, like Kenya Nationalization for the Deaf, Kenya Society, you know, for the deaf, for the blind. You know, there are many entities, so we support them so that they can carry, you know, advocacy and sensitization in their areas.
Yes, it was brought to our attention a while back by an organization. This is specific. They call themselves Crutches for Africa. They import mobility devices. They have partnerships with organizations in the US. They repurpose mobility devices. They collect them, organize them, clean them up, make sure they're in top form. Then they bring them back and they give it for free. The handicap they had is taxes.
I think those materials are tax exempted. And in the care in their catalog, there are devices that are meant for persons with disability that are tax-free, wheelchairs, crutches, and many things. What they need to do is maybe they need to reach out to us also for recommendation to the KRA. Because right now, assistive devices, you know, the demand is high and it is very expensive. Even as a council, we signed one that is affiliated to United States called Hope Mobility Kenya, where we recommend them to KRA. They bring, you know, containers, and then the wheelchairs then we release to distribute, so they can maybe reach out to us.
Okay. So any organization that is willing to support with all these devices just needs to reach out to the council.
We put a recommendation for them. Yes, it's provided KRA. It is assistive devices, and it is also in the cadre of the tax exemption from KRA.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.